everybody. Welcome to the Going Analog podcast, the show where board game industry guests bring their own topics and games to discuss. I'm your host, Christina, and it's always exciting to see an updated take on a classic board game, like the upcoming Flashpoint Legacy of Flame that's now available for a late pledge after a very successful Kickstarter. The original Flashpoint Fire Rescue was by Kevin Lansing and released it back in 2011, which is old for board games now, and is still a very popular cooperative game about putting out fires and saving lives. And the new Legacy of Flame takes the main system of Flashpoint and puts it into a 14-episode legacy campaign published by Indie Boards and Cards. So to discuss this exciting upcoming game, we invited one of the co-designers of Legacy of Flame, Ken Franklin, to be on our show today. Hi, Ken.
Hi there. How are you two today?
We're excited to talk to you.
We're good. Thank you. Thank you.
Ken has previously designed the Mansky Caper, which we were big fans of, which was a fun push-your-luck heist game. You also co-designed Back to the Future Dice Through Time for Ravensburger, Imagineers, and Tsuro Phoenix Rising. So lots of fun, different games that you've designed. And fun fact, I found out you were on the game show Mental Ninja a few years back. So hello.
Mental Samurai. Mental Samurai.
Oh, okay.
I was in the second episode where you had to answer 12 questions while flying around in this giant contraption. And at 6 questions, I had the record for speed. And I completely booted the 7th question and left the game with nothing. $0.
But now, that's prepared you for our show today. So
Of course, yes.
But Ken, don't worry about it because that's less embarrassing than Christina mixing up ninjas and
I know,
samurai.
that's pretty embarrassing.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to make any cultural references, but sorry.
We're excited to have you. We definitely want to talk about Flashpoint Legacy, the new version coming out. But what is your topic for us today that we'll talk about in a bit?
What I would like to talk about is the genre of Christian-themed or biblically themed tabletop games. It's undergone a delightful and, in my point of view, very desirable change for the better. And it's exciting to see it kind of trending right now in the board game industry.
That's awesome. Definitely a lot of stuff we don't know about that. So excited to talk about that soon. With us, again, is Shu, as usual. Hi, Shu.
Hi. That's a late introduction.
You say that every single time. I introduce you at the exact same time every single episode.
So late.
And of course, you fell asleep to reading
Put down the knife, Shu. Put down the knife.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will. Okay.
You fell asleep to reading a rule book again, as usual, last night. So, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah. And unfortunately, I was distracted by TikTok this morning when I should have been reading rules when I woke up.
So Gen Z.
Yeah.
So Gen Z, you know. What is our topic for today?
So we're since Ken is making a legacy game, and we've played a few ourselves, I thought it'd be a chance to kind of talk about legacy games in general. Like, what are they? You know, what in case you're not familiar, what they are just games that you play, sort of a campaign where you return to it and continue a story of some sort, but the game usually makes permanent changes of some sort. Like maybe you might put stickers on a board, or you might cross off something with permanent ink, or you might tear up a card and never see it again. So permanent changes happen and affect future plays. And then so we're going to talk about that genre in some of our favorite examples of such.
Yes. To get to know everybody, though, in the beginning of our show, we like to just highlight a game we wanted to chat about. Could be recent, could be a classic, whatever we feel like. And so today we wanted to talk about ArcheOlogic. ArcheOlogic, a new game.
I'm not familiar with that game.
Yeah. It's spelled with a big O to highlight that there's the archaeology aspect, but the logic part, because it's a deduction game designed by Johan Levitt, who also co-designed Turing Machine. So I was very excited by that because Turing Machine was a very interesting new take on deduction games, really fast and quick. And ArcheOlogic does some very similar things in some ways, where it's a deduction game, very snappy and quick compared to some of those longer deduction games that we've played in the past. And in this game, the tweak to it is that you're trying to figure out the correct polyomino placement of some tiles where certain traps are, as you are archaeologists trying to discover something. Go through this temple and not die, I guess.
Trying not to take a giant boulder to the face.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Spikes, flames, whatever those traps are. So it's actually very abstractified on the tiles, of course, but there's a very fun, weird system where you can ask questions about how many shapes are within a column or row, or what types of traps are on this axis, and the answer comes from this giant wheel type thing, and it's so. Unlike some other games in the past that I've liked, like I've really liked Cryptid, which was a fun deduction game, but humans were the keepers of the information, and if the humans made an error, then your whole deduction was, thrown to the wind, and you couldn't do anything, right? So in ArcheOlogic, as with Turing Machine, you're asking the question to a machine or some sort of apparatus that you put together, basically.
It's like you imagine like a wheel that has little cutouts, and then depending on how you spin the two wheels against each other, it will reveal different pieces of information. So it's like you don't want the person next to you to see, because you're like, okay, you're peeking through these little windows, and you're like, oh, there are this many things in row A, for example, or there are this many traps in column 2, and so on. And then so then you get a piece of paper, and it's really funny because this game doesn't give you, unlike a lot of other games, it's like very structured clue sheet. This one just gives you blank pieces of paper. Yeah. It's like, take your own notes, however you want to take it. So everyone's just scribbling down notes of like, I know this, and you have a little screen so you could take these kind of Tetris pieces and kind of start to kind of mock place where you think things are. And in the end, you have to get everything to fit perfectly, and it's a race to be the first player to do so. And it is amazingly designed, like this, same as Turing Machine, of like, man, they put together this system that's going to reveal information. It has to be super precise, because if anything's off, it just breaks the game. And so it's just amazing how they designed this to give you the right clues, and everyone, you could sense this kind of energy in the room of like people are getting closer and closer. You're like, oh no, people are onto something and I have to catch up. And then you're just this nervous, exciting energy that builds to the climax of finally someone solves it, and then everyone else
they didn't.
Or they didn't, or they think they did, and they didn't, and then, but if they did, and everyone's like, "Oh, I was so close! I was only 1 or 2 moves away," and then, so it's also exciting from that point of view that there's like it's not just the game ends. How many points do you have? Who has the most points? It's like it's a race, and then it just gets more and more tension built up, and then more excitement built up to the end of that. And it's not a long game either.
It's one of those games where being second is sometimes worse than being last.
Yes, very much so. You're like, I'm so close. I was so close.
That's been me both games I've played. So. It does have an aspect where, like, the first game I played, I was like, how did you get this so fast? I was so mad at my friend Julie because she just took a 50-50 guess because she wanted to get it in early, and she was right. I was like, how did you know it was like in this orientation and not that? And she's like, I didn't. And so she just guessed. And it works out, but that didn't work out for our friend Nam the next time. So luckily it's a really quick game and lots of puzzles into it. So not quite as quick as Turing Machine, I'd say, but also very fast. So, you don't feel horrible at having wasted your time and not won, I guess, because you can reset.
Definitely want to look at that. That's one I really liked the production values in Turing Machine with the cutouts and the cover and then the components. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I think if people think Turing Machine may be a little bit too sterile and clinical looking, because it's very mathematically themed, right? It's all about machines and math, punch cards. So if people find it maybe too like, oh, it's just pure math and it's just kind of dry looking, which we don't mind, especially Christina. Christina teaches math.
I'm a dry person.
So, that's not something that we care about. But if people are looking for something that's a little bit more tactile, because you're actually putting pieces around and trying to fit polyomino pieces down into a grid, and it has a little bit more of a theme, because it's just this little bit, this archaeological.
I try to emphasize the theme.
But
Phil taught me, did not mention the theme at all.
But I think it's a little bit more interesting from those perspectives. That it's like maybe more approachable.
Little fun fact: I went to medical school in 1977. My undergraduate degree was in computer science, and I actually wrote my first programs on punch cards. So to me, it was very much a blast from the past playing Turing Machine, and something I was very comfortable with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you definitely should check out ArcheOlogic because it's like, you could almost think of it as a sequel to Turing Machine.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what game did you bring for us, Ken?
Well, he said, reaching off camera, I'm talking about Kingsburg.
Oh, yeah.
That's a classic.
Kingsburg, a classic by Andrea Cervesio. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. And Luca Iannacco. I would call it dice placement, action selection, somewhere in there, with lots of different routes to victory because you can build different villages of buildings to try and get the most points at the end of 4 seasons. I picked that because it was involved in 2 miracles of my life. I have been a game collector, designer, and player since age 6, back in 1961.
Wow.
And in 2011, the summer after my first wife, Terry, had passed from colon cancer, my son, Matt, went to Gen Con as an artist in Artist Alley, and he invited me along to sit at his table. And I didn't know what Gen Con was, had no idea, but I jumped at the chance, and I had a prototype game that it was 16 cards and a bunch of poker chips in a baggie. I had no idea what a pitch meeting was, what a sell sheet was, anything like that. But I said, let's do this. So we went to Gen Con. I was floored. And I went around to publishers and said, how, want to look at my game? And some of them appropriately brushed me off. But Calliope gave me an interview and let me pitch the game, and they signed it on the spot. And that became the Mansky Caper. And at that same convention, one of the commissions my son Matt had was a bunch of people who wanted to have a cartoon of them playing Kingsburg. I'd never heard of the game, so I made a point of buying it and immediately enjoyed it. Now, the next year, and again, I was expecting to spend the rest of my life alone. I got a email saying we're going to have gamer speed dating. I went, first of all, how did I get on this list? and that night I was praying and I said, God, do you really have someone else out there for me? And I heard audibly, yes. Okay, so I signed, yes, God. So I got on, signed up for it, and nothing happened there. But I came back and got on eHarmony and said, I'm looking for a person who's lost their spouse to cancer with a Christian background, and I matched with Debbie Netto, who curiously had canceled her subscription 3 days before then, but she still matched number 1. And we met, and that first day we met, she came to game night, and we got out Kingsburg. And she said, oh, I've never played games like this. I've played games like Sorry and Clue and Life, but I'll try it. And she beat us all by 7 points. Mopped the floor up with us. And I said, there just might be something here. We were married the next year, and she's been my God gift for the last 11 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's such a sweet story. And Kingsburg themed, as you mentioned. So
I'm glad Ken went second.
I know.
Just describing a game straightforward is not nearly as awesome as your story was. So.
Well, I really enjoy Kingsburg because, and I haven't played many of the expansions. There is an expansion box with several different options in it. But I like Kingsburg because there are ways to get ahead and fall behind. And it's not at all obvious who's going to win 2/3 of the way through the game, because you can all of a sudden find a different path to victory that nobody else had thought of.
Yeah, we played it. It's been a long time, but it was one that we really, really liked.
Yeah, the expansion, it's been so long I couldn't tell what it was, but I do remember one specific module in the expansion that was really good. I thought made the game better without being intrusive, but it's been so long I can't remember what it was. Yeah. But
But let's dive into some new games and talk about our topic.
Okay.
So, what is our topic, Shu?
Yeah, so our topic, legacy games. But before we dive into some of our other kind of favorite examples of games we played, Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your new project that wrapped up on Kickstarter?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to massage your definition of legacy just a little bit. A legacy,
Sure. Okay, yes.
because there are legacy games and there are campaign games. Campaign games are ones where you have scenarios in a row and you progress through the scenarios. Aeon's End by Indie Boards and Cards is a perfect example of a campaign. They have 2 or 3 campaign games. They do have an Aeon's End legacy. But in the campaign game, whether you win or lose, you go on to the next piece of the story. And when you're done, your copy is pretty much the same as anybody else's copy. In legacy games, and the first one in the genre that I'm aware of was Risk Legacy. You actually had boxes in the package that said, open this when this condition arose. And it permanently changed the rules. Stickers were in there that would change the rule book. There were rules in the game that said, you know, the winner gets to pick one of the country cards and tear it up, which was heresy. Oh my God!
I know.
I'm going to lose one of my. And then there were, again, stickers placed to the board. You can name cities, things like that. And there was this one little envelope under the board that said, "Do not open this ever."
I remember that. Yep.
When we were all finished with it, of course we opened it and caused the Earth to shift on its axis and completely screw up the game. But after that first game, there were a few legacy games that had the destroy some components things, and that got a little bit of pushback. People don't like destroying things. Plus the fact that it's not exactly
Gamers like us,
yeah, it's not exactly carbon friendly. So modern, I think modern as in 2024, legacy games will have stickers, will have an evolving rule book, and will add components in. But you will probably have an envelope called the archive or the box where you'll put components away and not use them. And then, of course, sometimes you can get what's called a recharge pack. Charterstone was the first big version of that, where when it was done, if you wanted to go back to the beginning, you could buy this box and put it back to where it started. And then you could go through it again. The game that you have been graciously leading me into is Flashpoint Legacy of Flame. I'll tell you the story behind that. Tricia Sidney is a very good friend of mine who worked at Indie Boards and Cards. And she had some medical issues, and we'd known each other for 2 or 3 years, and she called me in the middle of the night wanting some medical advice. And I answered because she's my friend and put her mind at ease and everything was fine. And at the end she says, "Oh, you know what?" And I said, "What else is going on?" She said, "I'm trying to figure out if I can convince Indie Boards and Cards to make a legacy version of Flashpoint." And I said, "I could do a legacy version of Flashpoint. I could do that." And she said, "Oh, could you? Please." And so I said, "Just give me a little time." And the next day I called my 2 friends, Chris Leader and Kevin Rogers, who were my co-designers on Back to the Future Dice Through Time. And I said, "Hey, you guys like Flashpoint, right?" They said, "Yes." And I said, "We may have an in to do a legacy version." And they said, "Don't tease me, Ken." And so we had a pitch to them with the first 3 episodes outlined within 3 weeks.
Wow.
And we presented it to them, and they said, "Go for it," signed us to a contract. And over the next 2 years, we finished it start to finish. And now, as you pointed out, it is had a very successful Kickstarter. The current expectation is that it'll be shipped the first quarter of 2025. But it just so happens that 4 preview copies have been made for final beta testing, and 12 feet that way, 12 feet behind me, we're going to have the last session of one of those testing groups today. And they're going to get to see what the end of the campaign is. And
okay. Exciting. So you're still tweaking.
Well, one of the things about campaign games, about legacy games, is you'll have what's called a paragraph book, which the story will change based on what your decisions are. And the paragraph book in Legacy of Flame is several hundred paragraphs, and we have several envelopes of, if you make this choice, you open this. If you make this other choice, you open this. And so at the end, your game doesn't look like anybody else's because you've made different choices. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't mess anything up. So we want a group that's not us playing through the game from start to finish, while Chris and Kevin and I sit back and take notes. And we found some significant ways to improve it. And as we're going through, so we're very glad we went through it. But they're all leaning in and they're all enjoying it, which is very gratifying.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the original designer of Flashpoint, Kevin Lansing, was he involved at all, or was it more like the framework?
No, Kevin actually pretty much moved on from the project after the first expansion or so. So he really wasn't available for us, and we took the basic family version and made that Prologue 1. We made we took the advanced version of Flashpoint Fire Rescue and made that Prologue 2, but we added in a couple of the concepts that carry throughout the campaign. One of the things we've changed is that there is it's called an event deck, and one of the Flashpoint Legacy expansions has advanced event deck for random things that might happen during, but we made that a story element. There's a deck of 6 to 8 cards, and at certain points in the game you flip one over and the story changes. So it's designed to provide some increased tension and some excitement and surprise to each time you play it through.
Nice. Was there any extra research you did on the life of a firefighter or anything since you were like doing this whole campaign?
Absolutely.
I mean, legacy game. Legacy.
Kevin has 2 friends who are professional firefighters, and he consulted with them early on. And we divided the design process into 3 parts, and that's one of the reasons why I love Kevin and Chris so much, is because we enjoy working together so well. Kevin wrote the narrative of the story. He wrote what was going to happen over the course of the campaign. I'm more of a prototyper. I created tabletop simulator versions of this, and I live in Southwest Michigan. Kevin and Chris live in Illinois, and so we spent 3 hours a week on Tabletop Simulator testing and playing this game each week, and then based on what we found, we'd make modifications and come back the next week. And so I was the prototyper, and I was also the guy who was keeping track of all the paragraphs to make sure that nothing was broken. And then Chris is a magnificent rulebook editor and explainer, and he's got an incredible sense of what keeps the game fun versus what makes it boring and drag. And so he was able to keep that pace as we were going through, and the 3 of it, and we're pretty pleased with how it's worked so far.
That's pretty exciting. Yeah, I played Flashpoint, but it's also been a long time. That was years and years ago. So it sounds like the legacy format is a good format for that kind of game. Well,
there were several different expansions, like for planes and submarines and 2-story buildings and all sorts of different new characters added in. There was one where you had one of the characters could be a fire dog and all of that. Yes. And we went through all of that, but we were specifically given permission by Indy to use as much or as little of that as we wanted. So there will be 2-story buildings in Legacy of Flame, so you will get to use ladders. But we tried to learn from the experience of the other games and refine them as much as possible to keep the fun to the highest level possible.
Make this the ultimate Flashpoint experience, right?
That's and well, the other, not the ultimate, but not the final Flashpoint experience, because one of the directions we had was, when it's done, any of those 14 maps can be used with any of the firefighters from any other Flashpoint game.
Oh,
so you could then you could go back and play any of those episodes you wanted with any previous Flashpoint stuff, and you could go back with the people that you had created. Each of the 8 firefighters on the team, they start out working in fire school together, and they graduate and all go to the same fire station. And as you progress, they develop differently. And when you're all done, your firefighters look nothing like anybody else has. And so you could take your favorite character or anyone from any other Flashpoint, and you could still use all the material in the Legacy of Flame box.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Would it be a spoiler to ask if there's a fire dog in Legacy of Flame?
I can neither confirm nor deny anything about that.
Putting you in the corner, all right.
Okay. I can tell you that there you will see a dog at some point in the campaign.
Okay. Good to know. Everybody loves a fire dog. Were there? So you've mentioned, obviously you've done a lot of research on the previous Flashpoints and other legacy games that have maybe inspired that. Were there any specific legacy games that you felt you were taking some inspiration from, or anything like that? Yeah,
I think the original Risk Legacy was something that we really enjoyed. We also had played Betrayal on the House of the Hill Legacy. Clank Legacy was another good one. We wanted to focus on concepts that wouldn't just be one-off. Some legacy games will say, for this game and for this episode and this episode alone, this is a rule. And then you never use that rule again for the rest. We didn't like that. We wanted each thing to build and enrich the universe as the story went along. So,
interesting.
And that's one of the things that we really focused on.
I always like when Shu first played a legacy game. He did play Risk Legacy for several episodes, and I just remember he won an episode and he named his city Shuville. That's bad.
Yeah.
He took that.
Now, I will tell you that one of the games that the three of us truly love was the Pandemic Legacy series.
Same. I was going to have to bring that up too.
No,
yeah.
we played Legacy, Pandemic Legacy 1, Season 1, Season 2, and back to Season 0. We really appreciated the differences in how the narrative worked. Partway through Pandemic Legacy Season 1, I think it's been enough years now, it's spoiled that a little bit. Halfway through Pandemic Legacy Season 1, you find out that one of you has been a traitor, and you lose that character. That was me.
It was huge.
I didn't want to be a traitor. I don't want to be a traitor. What are you doing? I made this nice person, and now they're gone. It was crushing.
I think we had named that character Panda also. It was very strange in our campaign. But I still feel that my first legacy game was Pandemic Legacy Season 1. And it just blew my mind. It was so cinematic, and the narrative was so involving and such a different experience than any games I'd played before, that's sort of what I look for in a legacy or campaign game now too. It was just... I just think that's still probably my top gaming experience.
That's wonderful.
So,
it is. It's tremendous. And we had a Zoom meeting with Rob Davio early on. We had known him because of other games that we had worked with Calliope Games, and so we picked his brain about where the bear traps are, what are the things you want to not do as you're developing a legacy game, and his advice was very useful.
Oh, that's cool.
Was there one piece of advice that stuck out to you, talking to Rob?
Well, I think we've already covered the fact that people are not a big fan of destroying things.
New golden rule for that.
Other than that, nothing really pops to mind at the moment, except that he's a really nice guy, and I'm not fit to repack the components of his game. He's pretty clever guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been our only legacy game we're playing sort of currently right now would be My Island,
The sequel to My City.
Yes, this and more of like a polyomino game, and it's very light, but we enjoy it because we did play through My City all the way through during pandemic, and
during the real life pandemic.
The real lifetime pandemic, that's right.
Right.
And, when we were all in quarantine, and it was what I really liked about that, even though it's a pretty light game, was the rules really just layer on top, like you were talking about, where I enjoyed the fact that as you're getting like better at placing, because it's very polyomino based, like place your tiles to score the best, etc. But as you're getting better at that aspect, they're adding, rules to make it a little bit more strategic. So challenging you as your skill level improves too. So it sounds like that's something you're going for also in Flashpoint.
That's something that, according to our testers, it's something we've achieved.
Awesome.
Cool. Good luck with that. Yeah. I don't have much to add here other than, for me, it's my favorite legacy game I've played so far is still Pandemic Legacy Season 1. Just because of the twists and turns, the experience. We played also so My City, My Island, Charterstone, Clank Legacy, all the Pandemic Legacies.
We never finished Season 0.
We didn't. We found it too hard, Season 0. After a couple of episodes, we were like, this isn't that fun. It's just brutal. It was so brutal. So we didn't get to experience a lot of that. And then we played a little bit of that Euro one, Queensdale. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
I played one or two episodes of Queensdale, and we just didn't have a lot of fun doing it. So,
yeah,
I think we fell off of that pretty quickly too. For that reason. Yeah.
But Pandemic Legacy, that's the one where I'm like, when I tell people, like, I have a friend who we had an extra copy because we played with another couple who also had the game, so we only needed one copy. So we've always had this shrink wrap copy. I sold it to a friend, Chris, and then they're playing it through now, and I'm just like eager. I'm like, did you get to April yet? Like, because there's the big twist that happens in April, and I'm just trying to figure out where they're at without spoiling anything, because I'm just like kind of living it again through them, and then trying to see it through their eyes. But they're having a lot of fun with it right now.
That's great.
Okay.
And I want to leave some time to talk about your topic, Ken. So can you remind us of that?
Yeah. I'm, as I pointed out at the start of the episode, I consider myself an immensely blessed man. I've experienced many miracles in my life. And, it's miraculous if you find one person to spend your life with who wants to spend the rest of your life with you. I've had two. And there's no way I can pay that back, that much of grace. So my entire motivation in designing games and playing games is trying to share that kind of positive experience across the game table. When I first went to Gen Con in 2011, the entire Christian experience was one little tiny booth way back in the back left. That was Jesus Loves Gamers. And they had a little notebook, and you could buy a t-shirt, and that was about it. And at that point, less than 10% of people attending Gen Con would identify themselves as Christian. Nowadays, I've been on the Christianity and Gaming panel at Gen Con twice. I'm very good friends with Bubba Stallcup and the rest of the folks that Love Thy Nerd. And that percentage is now up very close to 50%. And
wow.
Back in 2011, most of the time when people would put out a Christian game, it was either Bible trivia or you can do these things and go to hell, or you can make a change and win the game. No, that is not how it works. That's not how grace works. And so now, in the last 3 to 4 years, there have been many games that are set in the Middle Eastern culture of Christianity, of the early days of Christianity, that are fun experiences without trying to hit you over the head of it. And in the process of doing that, show the value of interacting positively with the other people across the table. Now, one of the examples is Jack Dunbar's New Kingdom Gardeners, and Kickstarter this month, New Kingdom Sowers is a sequel that's coming out, where you're gardeners trying to plant plants and weed out weeds, and you can get extra points by helping others as you're helping yourself. That's my favorite kind of game mechanic. One of the mechanics that I baked into Mansky Caper on purpose was the concept of the favor, where you have to get somebody else to help you, but you help them at the same time. So the best strategies are ones where you help others at the same time you're helping yourself. New Kingdom goes into that all in. There's Deliverance. Andrew Lowen's game Deliverance is a angel versus devil warfare game that focuses on, you can get a benefit off of prayers of people who are trying to support you, but it's a hack and slash. But it's a hack and slash set in the Christian theme, and it is a campaign game where you add abilities to your characters as you go through it, and tells a story. But it's not about whether you're going to hell or heaven. It's about good versus evil. And it's incredibly well balanced, incredibly integrated, great mechanics, and a lot of fun to play. Let's see. There's Jerusalem Anno Domini, where you're a group of disciples trying to make sure that the Last Supper is catered correctly. You're trying to make sure there's wine and bread and fish, and you want to be in the room when it happens. So you're trying to do worker placement things to get your people there and get the supplies there so that you can see what this experience is at the end of it. And I don't think there's any take that. You're working beside each other, and it is a worker placement. So I wish I had done that instead of you, but it's still, again, a fun experience where you're communicating and taking time with each other. There's a cooperative game called Commissioned, where you're the early church after Christ's resurrection, and you're trying to build new churches and avoid the Roman soldiers who are trying to kill you. But you're trying to spread things out, and again, worker placement, action selection. And again, it's about living in that world, just like you can have a lot of fun living in Oriental Samurai. You can have a lot of fun living in Transylvania. You can have a lot of fun living in Victorian England. You have a lot of fun living in the Old West. You can have a lot of fun living in any of the cities of any Euro game that you can name.
All of those games.
But now, the Christian milieu is no longer forbidden, because people are focusing on it as a game and a fun experience, as opposed to I'm going to show you why you're going to hell unless you think the way I do.
Right.
That doesn't work.
It's really interesting.
So,
do you think there was one sort of big game that opened that up
I really
to
don't.
this sort of what you see now?
I don't think so. I think it was a matter of people who are comfortable showing their faith through love and grace. Mike Perna, whose nickname is the Dwarf Bard, runs a nonprofit called Inroads Ministries, where he will retell biblical stories set in a D&D universe. And those kinds of things where people will be comfortable talking about faith issues. And again, I want to emphasize there's a difference between faith issues and religious issues. Faith issues are where you're talking about your relationship with the Creator. Religious issues are whether you belong to a human organization. We don't want any religious games. We're talking about games that are comfortable thinking about faith as you're playing and interacting with other people. And so as people like Mike Perna and the people at Love Thy Nerd would have gaming events, people became more comfortable saying, we could make a game about this. And I think that's where the current explosion has come through. And it
sounds like you're...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
It sounds like you're saying that a lot of these games, they're really focused on being good games first, and then it's almost like a backdrop or the setting or the context for what you're doing in these games. But do you feel like the sort of theme is... Do you think this combination works for more mainstream distribution of these kind of games, or for a big publisher to pick up? Or do you feel like it's still, people are a little bit scared about like maybe focusing on a game that's like one specific religion?
No, I think there have been games focusing on Semitic, the Jewish religion. There's been games that our Tales of the Arabian Nights was a campaign game set firmly in the I'm blocking on the word on the Muslim heritage, and you were dealing with that kind of milieu, and it was very comfortable in that. Again, it wasn't the faith is not pasted on. It's an idea that this is just as valid a place to talk and play as any other. And that is a hurdle that I think has just recently been overcome. Now, as far as big publishers, a couple of the games I mentioned had 6-figure Kickstarters. Deliverance has made a bunch of money, and they've got another Kickstarter coming up soon. New Kingdoms, I think, was beat 50,000. There's another called Meek Heroes Victory by Joe Bragg that has had a very successful crowdfunding. And it just so happens that a game by Calliope Games that I work for is coming out in 2025 that is that they're hoping to get partnerships with 3 large national organizations for marketing. And it's called Candlelight.
Cool.
Candlelight is a game where each card is a player, a person, and we've worked very hard to make sure that the diversity of the cards in the game matches the statistical diversity of the United States.
Oh, wow.
And each of those cards has the ability to give love, insight, or support to other people. But as each card is played to the table, each person has an emotional burden. And it takes a certain amount of love, insight, or support to relieve that person's burden. And you have 3 cards in your hand, and you go around the table placing a card, directing a gift toward another player, and if you lift that person's burden, that triggers a power-up that can then create combos. And the object is to lift everybody's burden in the community before you run out of cards.
Oh, interesting.
So it's sort of like very interesting because, like, as you mentioned, there's definitely games maybe that do both, but definitely games that use that sort of Christian history as the setting, and then some that you feel are very good at sort of promoting that sort of faith-based philosophy that you're looking at.
Precisely.
Right?
You've got it exactly right. So being comfortable with discussing the history and without trying to force, Main Street Protestantism down somebody's throat, but focusing on the positive values of a faith-based life, and showing people that can be a fun experience.
And I think that's an interesting shift for sure. I think it was amazing to me to hear about that sort of percent change that you were talking about from Gen Con when you first went to what we see now, and how, I guess gaming's just spread a lot in general to a lot of people, but especially obviously in the Christian community too. So really interesting, because I think then you finally do get that catching up of like a fun game mechanic rather than just like window dressing, or in some way like those trivia based games.
And to me, there's one of the Carcassonne variants was the Ark of the Covenant, which had to do with the Jewish movements, where instead of just placing your characters in fields or on roads, you could actually move this ark and score points. So it doesn't have to be a Christian theme. The fact is a comfortable play space, and I'm very glad to see us moving that way. I am personally not a zombicide person, but I don't have any trouble sitting down and playing a hack and slash with somebody, because we're at the same table having fun together, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
And if we can include our faith life in that, in addition to our secular life, I think it's a richer experience.
Would it be fair to say that even some of these games where some of the values it's trying to promote is so general that you think it could span across different religions or even people who are not of faith?
Oh, that again, Candlelight, we're very specific about making sure we're representing the cross section of America, and we are not a Christian nation. We have all faiths involved, and embracing the positive aspects of all those faiths is something that you need to strive for.
Yeah. Being able to focus on that positive, it'd be really interesting to see, the doing the favors for things. I think we, as gamers who are more competitive gamers, you can really focus too much on I need to win at the expense of other people, or how do I make this to my benefit? Where if you build in some extra mechanics, that can really influence how you view life in some ways, subtly for sure.
Right.
But even just adding this new aspect to gameplay can be very interesting and I think more enriching anyway.
I think some of the most fun experiences you can have involve that action selection that helps others at the same time you do yourself. Concordia is a game where if you choose a trade action, you get a beneficial trade action, but everybody else gets a little bit of trade action. Last Light by Roy Cannaday is when you pick to do something, everybody else gets to do something along that same line. Tiny Epic Galaxies is, again, when you pick an action, everybody gets to do a little bit along that same way. So you're always doing something that you have to consider what you're doing for others rather than against others, while you're advancing your own cause. Lots and lots of games, and those are my favorite kinds of games, where doing something that benefits the table while it's benefiting you, without being a true cooperative game. I refer to those as collaborative games, and I think of the Mansky Caper as a collaborative game, because you're all trying to steal Al's stuff back, but you deserve a little bit more than the person next to you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it's really interesting to think about that. This is a new aspect that we weren't that exposed to, but it'd be interesting to see how that infuses a lot of future games as we continue.
Absolutely.
So thanks for bringing that to our topic.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for joining us today, Ken. Where can people follow you and what you're up to and new games and all of that good stuff?
Well, I'm on Facebook as Ken Franklin. I'm on Instagram as Ken Plays the number 2 Grin. And that's also it's also my Twitter handle, or X handle, although I spend very little time on X these days. And you can find me around Gen Con every year, usually working at Calliope Games, where my work title is the Senior Yeoman, which means the old guy who gets stuff done. So I do
That's important.
Lots of little tasks for Calliope, keep my hand in while I'm designing. So those are the best.
And I
ways
love
to
your
do it.
saying, which is you like to play to grin. So I think that's awesome.
You can actually, if you'll go to geekygoodies.com, you can buy a shirt that says "Some play to win, I play to grin," and that was Chris
Yes.
Cormier got permission for me to make that into a shirt, and I'm very pleased that he did.
Nice. Thanks for listening to all of our friends, and late pledges are open for a Flashpoint Legacy of Flame right now. So we'll have a link to that on our podcast. And thanks, as usual, to our stupendous editor, Mike Zipkin. And now everybody can stop listening and go play a game. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.